In progress.
Okay, welcome to the June 3rd, 2026 Economic Development Committee. We have two wonky but very important retail items tonight. First call to order. You take roll, please.
Chair Rectal.
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Liu.
Here.
For the record, 3 present.
Okay, thank you. First, we have public comment, anything under the purview of this committee that is not on the agenda. Any hands raised?
There are currently no requests to speak.
Okay, we'll move on to the action items. Alex, are you running the show?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good evening, Chair and council members. For tonight's agenda, we have, as you indicated, 2 very important agenda items. The first one will be on the Retail Vitality Ordinance, followed by what's known as the shrink wrap rule, and that's really a text amendment being considered by you all today, and hopefully it'll move forward to the City Council. And then if we have time, we'll get in front of you and present on the Economic Activity Report. If there was a theme for this evening, it's about flexibility. Business and investors like flexibility, and they look at risk when they go into different environments, business environments. And so tonight's conversation hopefully will allow for some of that flexibility. And our development community, our business community, they're not just behind me, but they're listening. So we will start with that. So if we can kick it off for that first item, if we can put that presentation up. So this, the first item is the Retail Vitality Ordinance. This was originally on the May 18th City Council agenda. The council didn't get to it, so it's moved to here to move things along. This is a City Council priority. And I think one thing that's really important is this item achieves an economic development strategy. It's implementation action 10, which allows for a broader range of retail and ground floor uses to meet the market's need. So online, we have 2 consultants, Consultant Jeannie Eisberg of Lexington Planning. She'll present, along with Christine Furstenberg of Metrovation Retail. And of course, Director Late and Assistant Director Armour are both here to respond to questions. And I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer now.
Thank you. Not much to add to that. I think I will hand it right off to Jean Eisberg, our consultant who prepared this draft ordinance for your consideration this evening.
Okay, good evening, committee members. So I have a few slides to share. This is just a little bit of background. You may recall a few years ago, Street Sense and Michael Baker International prepared reports where they really delved into the data to understand the context for retail, the market for retail. And during that time, there were a number of meetings within the PTC and ad hoc committees, but the PTC didn't have an opportunity to get to a full ordinance. So there was an interim ordinance that was adopted by the council in December 2024. Next slide, please. So what that interim ordinance did was it really was about uses. It expanded potential uses, things like personal services, pet-related uses, other types of retail-like uses. There were some changes to thresholds for waivers and adjustments, allowed for use regulations, and some modifications to formula retail on Cal Ave. So this ordinance sunsets at the end of the year, December 2026. And so we need to replace that ordinance with a permanent ordinance. And so you'll see when we look at attachment A, there are a number of red lines, and some of those are new ideas that are put in that ordinance, but we also need to make sure that we account for continuing ideas that were in the interim ordinance. So continuing those regulations as part of attachment A and the permanent ordinance. Next slide, please. So we have met with the Planning and Transportation Commission in a study session and a hearing. You may recall that we met with this committee back in January. We took your feedback, the PTC's feedback, and brought the ordinance to a PTC hearing in March, got their recommendation to move the ordinance forward. And so we got continued at the council meeting a couple weeks ago, which brings us here to this committee. We are looking for your feedback or recommendation on this ordinance. If we do have a positive recommendation, we will take the ordinance to the City Council in a couple weeks on the consent calendar. And again, that interim ordinance sunsets in December. Okay, next slide, please. So the purpose of this ordinance, the intent is to, again, as I mentioned, codify the regulations in the interim ordinance to the extent that we want to extend those. But the overall intent is to reduce ground floor vacancies to encourage vibrancy throughout the city's commercial areas. So this ordinance is rather long. It does a number of things, but in summary, it aims to allow a broader range of uses, both more classic retail uses, restaurant eating services uses, as well as retail-like uses, personal services, and other commercial uses, including to some extent office. We did identify a number of confusing regulations, and so we've sought to streamline and remove redundancies and inconsistencies where we found them. Third, we've aimed to reduce subjectivity, so to add more objective standard conditions where we could, and to reinforce the purposes of zoning districts as opposed to more subjective findings. And then lastly, we've sought to streamline permit approvals. That means changing the permit levels required, whether that's not requiring a conditional use permit, for example, but allowing certain uses by right. Next slide, please. So a few of the key changes. So first, in terms of eating and drinking services, the draft ordinance suggests breaking eating and drinking services into 3 classifications. So having a full service classification, that's a table service where you have wait staff, where you may stay longer sitting at a table. Second, a new category called limited service. And this is really a very common use that we see now, a quick service type restaurant or a cafe where you're ordering up front, where there's no wait staff, and you tend to not sit as long, or maybe there's limited or no seating in this type of use. And then the third that we did talk about with this committee and got your feedback on in January is a new classification for bars. And so this would be alcohol service either with food or excuse me, without any food service. And technically this is not permitted under the code right now, and adding this use in the current ordinance would allow bars without food service. And so you can see on the right-hand side, these do carry different parking regulations, and then there are also standard conditions that are proposed in the draft ordinance, particularly for bars, to make sure that there are no issues in terms of noise or other disruptions or trash, things like that, to make sure that those uses are consistent with uses and hours around them. Next slide, please. So another key change in terms of adding more flexibility is the idea about allowing neighborhood serving offices. This is a term of art already in the regulations. These are neighborhood serving is generally defined as uses that are customer forward. It's not uses offices for businesses. So it's really more local serving offices. And to allow those types of uses in downtown on California Avenue, in the rear of tenant spaces or fronting side streets. So that means not fronting University Avenue or Cal Ave per se. Second, the idea of allowing medical offices. So the draft ordinance states right now that medical offices would be allowed if they had a retail component in the front of the business on both University and Cal Ave. And a CUP would be required, a conditional use permit, which allows staff to provide additional conditions to review a project and apply additional conditions if required. Third, there are already some design standards for any use on California Avenue or University Avenue. But the draft ordinance requires specific design standards for these types of medical office or office uses. And then lastly, there were a number of complicated use regulations for offices, particularly in Charleston and Midtown shopping centers. And so we've sought to simplify those regulations. Next slide, please. So I think we have an attachment in the staff report about these particular areas where there are a number of different zoning district overlays and base districts that apply to these areas. And so we've sought to streamline this, and we can talk a little bit more about what this means, but essentially that within these shopping centers, the CN zoning district would apply. And then there are some footnotes with specific use regulations that would apply just in these areas and to try to simplify and clarify what actually applies in these retail centers. Also to be more flexible about potential for residential should these shopping centers redevelop in the future, to specify that residential uses are allowed on upper floors and behind retail. And then third, to limit office to the extent that office is allowed, to limit it to neighborhood serving uses, which would be more appropriate in these neighborhood centers, which are within existing neighborhoods. And then lastly, allowing some additional uses, including retail-like uses like pet-related uses. Next slide, please. So I mentioned streamlining permitting. One key change is really a semantics change. It's not a process change, but the way it is now, conditionally permitted uses generally only require staff review and are only elevated to the Planning Commission or Council if they're referred there. And so there are a couple changes here. One is to actually change some permit levels from CUPs to uses by right. And so looking across the use tables and seeing which uses really don't have a significant impact and where those uses can be permitted by right rather than conditional uses. But again, changing that terminology. So whereas right now a conditional use permit can be seen as by a retailer as a issue that really, or time commitment that really needs to be surmounted. It can be seen more from a perception that it's a hard obstacle to get through. Calling it an administrative use permit, which is what it really is at the staff level, would allow for some streamlining and that perception that the process is not that onerous. Next slide, please. In terms of parking, we've made some changes to one, I mentioned the eating and drinking services, established a blended rate for Cal Ave, the way that there is a blended rate for downtown, and made some changes to the TDM thresholds, that's the transportation demand management thresholds, to make it a little easier for small retail additions in particular. Next slide, please. A couple changes to the retail preservation ordinance. Technically, the retail preservation ordinance applies to multifamily districts to the extent that there are retail or retail-like uses in multifamily districts, and also applies in the office manufacturing zones. What we see today is what you can see here, things like motels, daycare centers, senior centers, senior daycare centers. So the proposal is to exempt those districts except within the San Antonio Road Area Plan, since that process is currently still underway. Next slide, please. So those are really the highlights. The attachment A draft ordinance is somewhat lengthy, but that summarizes many of the key points. The staff recommendation is to recommend the City Council adopt an ordinance to amend sections of Title 16 and 18, as well as the zoning map to implement retail vitality measures. As indicated earlier, I am joined by my associate, Christine Furstenberg. My skill set is in zoning. Hers is really in retail. She's a retail broker and works with retailers and property owners all the time. So if you have specific questions about retail and what's going on in the market, I'm going to refer to her. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay. George or Greer, do you have any questions before we go to public comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our first speaker is Charlie W.
Good. Well, good evening, Chair, committee members, Charlie Y. Dance, Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber strongly supports the staff's recommendation and respectfully urges the committee to unanimously recommend the approval of the Retail Vitality Ordinance to the City Council. This proposal represents years of analysis, stakeholder outreach, consultant recommendations, Planning and Transportation Commission review, Retail Committee review, and collaboration between the city and the business community. Most importantly, it addresses a problem that everyone agrees needs attention, and that is reducing vacancies and improving the vitality of Palo Alto's commercial districts. Retail has changed dramatically over the last decade, and successful business districts require flexibility, clear regulations, and an environment that allows businesses and property owners to respond to the changing market conditions. This ordinance moves Palo Alto in that direction. It streamlines regulations, it reduces overlapping and conflicting requirements, expands opportunities for retail and retail-like businesses, simplifies permitting, and creates greater certainty for prospective tenants, property owners, and investors. Businesses considering Palo Alto compare us with other communities throughout the peninsula. The easier it is to understand our rules and navigate the approval process, the more competitive Palo Alto becomes as a place to invest, lease space, create jobs, and serve customers. These are practical, balanced reforms that support the city's goal of enhancing business vibrancy while maintaining the qualities that make Palo Alto unique. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ken H.
Good evening, Chair, Council members. My name is Ken Hayes with Hayes Group Architects. I'm in support of the retail vitality measures proposed for adoption and inclusion in the municipal code as outlined in the staff report. I believe these modifications will increase the flexibility and clarity needed to accommodate a wide range of potential businesses and tenants in our community. A healthy community has all storefronts and building floors occupied with tenants bringing life to the sidewalks and customers to the businesses. I'd like to see these pass the committee with unanimous support this evening. However, as good as these changes are, and they do need your support tonight, I don't want to derail the progress that's been made. There's a category of buildings that have been left out, historic buildings. Historic properties are a treasure that need to be preserved. These properties are often building types that are unusual or present with architectural nuances associated with their historic use. Examples include historic churches, civic buildings, and old theaters. To keep these buildings viable, there needs to be flexibility in permitted uses. Having these buildings occupied with tenants is imperative for the financial health and maintenance of the building and its ongoing disposition. Having them occupied increases the vitality of the community and neighborhood. The Palo Alto Comp Plan has policies and programs that address this need for flexibility and historic preservation. Policy L79 is one of them. Allow compatible, non-conforming uses for the life of historic buildings. There are more comp plan policies and programs in the letter that's in the packet tonight. An example of one historic property, a Category 1, the highest historic integrity, is the Varsity Theater. Since Hana House moved out, this building has about 2/3 of the ground floor vacant, nearly 10,000 feet. The theater is a perfect example of an historic building with an architectural nuance and impediment to the permitted uses. Entering from University, there's a 90-foot-long courtyard before there's any entry to the building. The frontage along University is 35 feet, but the building widens at the rear to 3 times this, where there are no street-facing walls or windows facing the sidewalk. Retailers are not interested in this building because this lack of frontage, the size of the ground floor, and the courtyard in front. And I believe this is a perfect example where there needs to be flexibility in the permitted uses as envisioned in the comp plan. Although it would be wonderful to return to the days of Wyndham Hill artists performing in the courtyard and a bar restaurant tenant, there are no prospects. And for the Varsity Theater, allowing office as a permitted use in the non-street facing rear portion of the building will open up options for tenants, allowing the owners to keep the building viable. The rear portion not occupied by Blue Bottle is 10,000 feet, a huge space not easily subdividable because the glass ceiling in the center, which allows one to see up to the historic ceiling 40 feet above. Neighborhood serving offices are usually not 10,000 square feet. Demising the space would be necessary, which is nearly impossible due to this glass ceiling. Allowing normal professional administrative office uses for the rear portion of the Varsity Theater will ensure that there's flexibility to keep the Varsity leased and the downtown occupied. It's taken a very long time for the retail vitality amendments, so moving forward with determination this evening is important. However, I ask that in the near future, you consider the fate of historic properties and how to keep them vibrant. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Peter G.
Good evening. First, a thank you to both staff and council for the effort to modernize the University Avenue GF zoning and for your outreach to the business community on ways to enhance downtown vitality. My family are longtime Palo Alto residents and the owners of 451 University, a building that unfortunately has been vacant for years. This building has defied our every diligent effort to fill it. It's a large and very deep building at almost 8,000 square feet over 2 levels. It doesn't divide sensibly, and it's located at the far east end of University Avenue at Kipling Street. As all of us in this room can attest, as you travel east on University Avenue towards Middlefield, there is a point where foot traffic essentially ceases to exist. Well, that point is Kipling Street, and that's where this building is located. Some people refer to that area as the dead zone. The great news is that with a modest update to the personal services definition, we now have a tenant that will fill the building. The tenant would be Necco Health, and they provide AI-based health screening. Trevor from Necco is here tonight and will speak more about the company via Zoom, so I won't dwell on what they do. But with their modern spa-like approach, they use advanced scanning technology paired with computer modeling and AI to make preventative health screening easy, fast, and accessible. There are 2 key distinctions. 1, there's no treatment on site. And 2, there's no fulfillment of medical orders. Their service is strictly an elective, direct-to-public personal service. Necco is currently located in downtown London and Stockholm. To welcome Necco to University Avenue, please consider the following. Adding number 10 to the current list of 9 allowed personal uses. Health screening, including biometric body scanning, imaging, and other health testing services directly serving the public, so long as no medical treatment and not primarily filling outside medical orders. Taking a step back, we're excited to be living in wondrous times with new personal services that AI unlocks. And we look forward to potentially seeing this change to the allowed personal services. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Steely.
Is it on? In your very positive effort to bring flexibility to support economic vitality, in this item, you have brought forward some very positive uses of office. I meant to come earlier to do it in public comment, but let me elaborate. I'm supportive on my concerns. I'm hoping the committee can deal with the major contradictory statements about office that the council is dealing with. You have a policy and services committee that attempted to restrict office to support housing. You have the same council on the San Antonio area plan discussion suggesting that office like the Presidio Bay Venture proposal in the CTI area would be positive in support of housing. I've talked to Stanford. I know Alex has talked to Stanford. And it's clear that Stanford, given incentives to combine office or hotel with housing in the shopping center and the research park, would be positive. So in support of this initiative, I can see some roadblocks ahead and the need for you all to take a leadership in really defining what office can do. You have an earlier committee report suggesting that the lack of office downtown played into the decline in retail activity because there are not enough customers. Building the customer base, which is what you're trying to do in this item and others, is really important for vitality for the businesses, and part of that will be office. So I'll write you more later, but my message is help the rest of the council clarify a consistent position on office as relates to economic vitality. I'm going to go watch the basketball game. I have a memo in the 3rd item that Alex will present. If any of you want to talk about that offline, the job trends, I'd be happy to do that. but I'm not feeling particularly well, and please go forward with this agenda item. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Trevor C.
Good evening. My name is Trevor, and I'm speaking on behalf of NECO Health. My goal is to tell you about our vision for the future of healthcare and the support with which we hope Palo Alto could provide in that future, specifically by supporting and expanding the proposed ordinance adoptions to the Palo Alto planning uses on University Ave. NECO was founded by Daniel Ek, the founder and ex-CEO of Spotify, as a means to bring prevention to the forefront of healthcare. Let me start with what NECO is not. NECO is not a traditional medical office. We do not diagnose. We do not prescribe. There are no physicians performing clinical procedures on site. What we do is use non-invasive visual and thermal scanning technology combined with AI to give clients meaningful health data points about their own bodies. The data behind our model speaks for itself. After first scans, nearly 80% of members received a clean bill of health. 13% were found to need medical treatment or monitoring for conditions they had no idea they had. 6% had significant conditions, and 1% received potentially life-saving interventions for things like aortic aneurysms, severe cardiovascular disease, and malignant melanoma, which has affected the lives of so many around us, myself included. None of the serious cases knew anything was wrong before they walked in. That last number is why we exist. This brings me to why retail corridors, like University Avenue, are exactly where we belong. We deliberately chose to operate in vibrant, walkable retail environments because we believe personal health services should feel accessible and welcoming. We have worked hard to create an experience that feels nothing like a trip to the doctor, and that approachability is reflected in the demand for our service and our unique custom interior designs, often exceeding several times the national average for build-out costs. We currently have a waitlist of over 300,000 people. That is consistent, reliable foot traffic every hour for whatever block we call home. Our operating hours reflect our clients' lives, not traditional medical schedules. We are open at weekends and into the evenings on weekdays because our waitlist demands it. What makes NECO truly unique is that we don't just operate health screenings. We design and manufacture the technology behind them, so locations are constantly at the forefront of the next wave of health prevention. Frankly, there's no better place in the world to plant this flag than Palo Alto. The city has quietly been the epicenter of nearly every technology that has reshaped modern life. The people who live and work here understand better than anyone what it means to be early on something important. We are not just looking for a retail address. We are looking for a home that reflects our ambition for what preventative health can become. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Elizabeth W.
Sorry. So my name is Elizabeth Wong, and I have several buildings in the city. I think that the direction of this ordinance, retail vitality ordinance, is very positive. And but I do, every speaker is telling you that even with this broad change and expanding the uses for downtown Palo Alto, there are many uses that still the ordinance or the temporary ordinance does not include. In particular, I have the building at 102-116 University Avenue. It is a glass and concrete building. And it was built as an office building, and it has been empty for the last 5 years, since 2021. I tried very, strongly to have an office on the ground floor, and I was asked not to do that. So the buildings, 102 is one building, and 116 University is another building. So the ground floor of both buildings are empty. And I think that it has to go through a hearing, and I was discouraged from asking for a CUP because they felt that it would be totally denied. But the fact is that the buildings are not built with a retail frontage. And so one of the tenants who is on the upper floor wants to exercise this option to rent the lower floor. And, excuse me, and he's scared to death to raise red flags. So basically, as even though the ordinance is very broad and extremely positive, I still think that there are many uses that are not, or situations that are not answered by this ordinance. And I want to see what can be done about it. So that's my comment.
That concludes public comment for item 1.
Okay, thank you. We're bringing back committee. George, you want to lead off? Comments or questions?
Sure. Overall, I think these are a broadly good set of changes, changes that we've seen before in PTC, changes that have gone through a lot of review, and I think largely are pretty no regret. I think I'm still sort of grappling with the AI health scanning service. I'm trying to make analogies between other medical offices, between uses like an auto showroom or something that might have a good amount of foot traffic, but no sort of direct sales tax. I'm trying to make analogies in my head with financial services or banks or things that you walk into. And what I'm netting out at is that it seems basically fine. I don't quite, so on that sort of thread, I think the nuance between a medical office and versus including this in some definition of personal services seems subtle to me in a way that I'm not sure I totally understand, because it seems like an AI health scanning service at least would be treated as some sort of medical office type use. So I'm probably missing a moving part there. Can staff sort of refresh me on why other personal service or medical office uses don't match this the use case that was brought up in public comment?
I'll start by saying that right now with the code, we use the presence of a medical professional who has a license from the state as the thing that says, okay, this is a medical office. And so what we've heard from this public commenter is trying to find a way that if there's something that has some medical professionals who do blood draws or these scans, doesn't necessarily trigger it to be considered a medical office. And this was something that the Planning and Transportation Commission talked through a lot and didn't come to a specific definition that they could recommend adoption of at this time, but recognize that council may be interested in doing something. I'll now pass it off to Ms. Eisberg to talk a little bit about the conversations we've had and the definition that was specifically proposed to try and distinguish this use from other medical office.
Yeah, so I think as the public commenter mentioned, there may be a distinction between more personal service uses that don't have treatment. I believe that's what the public commenter said. So as Assistant Director Armour said, the medical office definition right now talks about licensing from the state of California. Now, of course, there's also licenses for nail salon and hair salon professionals. So there's other licensing that might take place, but that is currently the bright line for medical related uses.
Okay. I don't see any particular downside for expanding this. I don't necessarily think that this is a use case that is sort of at risk of taking over every storefront on University, especially if we define it somewhat narrowly. Okay, the other question, or I think maybe the only point that could be controversial if we take this on consent for the rest of the council is retail preservation. I don't, sorry, give me a second. I think I'm generally comfortable with the idea that retail preservation still exists in all the commercial service and commercial neighborhood and San Antonio area retail uses. I'm trying to reconcile that map that was in the packet with the previous PTC and council discussion about the idea of their retaining retail nodes. In effect, it sounds like we are retaining retail nodes because we are retaining basically all of the commercial service and CN and CS retail along El Camino. Is that right?
So yes, the proposed change to the retail preservation was just a recognition that it might not be appropriate for it to apply to these residential zones, these multifamily residential zones. And so it's pulling back from that. And then a recognition that in some of the other zones listed, it's not necessarily the type of retail that this retail preservation was intended to preserve. We did include a cutout for San Antonio Road area plan just because that is ongoing.
Yep. Overall, I think this is pretty reasonable. I think there were a lot of thoughts about larger reforms to retail preservation. I love maintaining a high supply of retail, but I also love flexibility. But I think at this stage, it's a pretty non-controversial. Retail preservation is always controversial, but I think the way we've balanced it is good. So yeah, those are my comments. I think these are good, no regret changes, and open to a slightly more expansive definition of personal services.
Okay, thank you. Greer.
Sure, thank you. Generally align my comments with George's. Overall, I think this makes a lot of sense. On on retail preservation, I think my thinking on it has definitely evolved over time, and seeing what has worked and seeing what hasn't, and seeing us really trying to sometimes squeeze a round peg into a square hole. It has seemed, I think, especially when it comes to trying to promote more housing, that retail piece often gets in the way. Then we've seen a lot of businesses around the city where just retail doesn't make sense. And so I think staff found a really nice way to make modifications in probably the least controversial way, to George's point on retail preservation. So I support that. On this conversation about the body scanning. So would that, I guess, didn't quite get, at least I didn't quite hear kind of like, would that, what's being asked for in the public comment, would that be allowed under these proposed changes? If not, what modification would be necessary to allow it? And does staff see any unintended consequences with kind of expanding the definition to allow it?
I believe, and I'll have Ms. Eismer confirm, but I believe we would need to add additional detail, another listing under personal service to help show what falls there as opposed to what's medical office. And there was some language that was proposed by the public commenter that looks like it could work. We've had these ongoing discussions because there was concern about it no longer having the clear line and then expanding beyond what was intended. Ms. Eisberg, do we have that language in a way that was that in one of our pocket slides? We can
On
pick-
packet page 64.
Oh, okay.
We bring up the packet.
Maybe we could bring up that language.
The bottom of page 64, packet page 64.
So J there, the health screening, that would be that's proposed in the draft ordinance?
No, the
No.
oh,
That would be an addition. That would need to be part of your motion, because that's public comment, not part of the draft ordinance as we have it right now.
Wait, it's public comment. Sorry, so page 64, J there. That is.
Yeah.
So J would be new.
correct.
Right.
Everything else on that page is
already
the
included.
current.
Yes.
And the public commenter is suggesting that if we add that, then they're suggesting that we add that.
Well, I guess my question is, this was here before the public comment. J.
No. The current zoning stops at I.
Correct. J is not in the draft ordinance.
No, right. But I guess my point is, it's not like the J just appeared after that public comment. So J, where did J come from?
So it's language that was drafted by the public commenter, and they're recommending that
Okay,
you
previously.
edit.
Okay, thanks
Yeah.
for the clarification.
This page is actually not part of the packet. It's part of the public comment. So
It's
this,
not
this
in
was
the
not
ordinance.
authored by staff. It was authored by the public.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I didn't see
Yeah.
I didn't see it as an attachment there.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is part of attachment E, public
Okay.
comment, not part of the draft.
Thank you. I thought
ordinance.
this was part of the staff documents.
And so what they've included is the language that they're proposing, you consider, is that health screening, including biometric body scanning, imaging, or other health testing services directly serving the public, so long as no medical treatment and not primarily fulfilling outside medical orders. So it's not just a place where your doctor would send you there to go get your scan. There was some discussion of that at Planning and Transportation Commission. So they were trying to thread the needle of what they had heard as concerns from the Planning and Transportation Commission.
And why couldn't they reach a conclusion?
So this is language that was proposed by the public after the Planning and Transportation Commission discussion
Okay.
in response to the concerns that they heard there.
And has staff had a chance to have internal discussions about potential impacts of this? Because I think to me, this is sounding relatively benign, but I also don't like the idea of just including this in here just in the moment, especially if this is just going to go to council on consent, assuming it doesn't get pulled.
Yeah. I would say from a staff perspective that this is language that should give enough direction and distinguish it from other things. But I do want to give Ms. Eisberg a chance to respond as well.
So, this particular business is a body scan type of business. We were looking more holistically at the types of new, what I think of as kind of hybrid personal service uses, medical office uses that we're seeing. So aesthetic treatments, Botox, wellness kind of spas. So I do think that J is fairly narrow for this particular type of use. And if this city and this committee is interested in expanding these types of uses that are sort of medical related, but have a frontage that looks a little bit more like retail. You can go in and make an appointment or have a service on site. It's a little bit different than it's not like walking into a dentist's office or your maybe more staid doctor's office. So it has a different kind of feel. While we're looking at this screen, item A, beauty shops, nail salons, day spas, to some extent, these types of uses read more like a day spa. So I think J, there's components of it that may be fine, but it is rather narrow, and I don't think it encapsulates these types of hybrid uses that the city already has in other locations and that are rather prominent today. So I think it could be expanded to be more flexible. And I do have some ideas if you want to talk language.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. How I see these is that they are elective, non-emergency wellness aesthetic treatments. We could either specifically say they're not classified as medical office or stay silent and allow that interpretation to be made at the staff level.
Okay. No, that's helpful. Give it some more thought. Okay, moving on. New definitions for animal care. So does that, I guess I don't want to see us be in another situation of with mini cat town and all that. So does those new definitions then allow something like mini cat town and in particular mini cat town to stay on Cal Ave?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then last question, Director Late, this is probably going to be for you. This idea of allowing housing in Midtown and Charleston Shopping Center on upper floors and behind retail, I'm that that seems like a pretty significant change, and kind of curious how that then kind of exposes those sites to just various state housing laws, variances that could cause pretty significant impact to the neighborhoods around those shopping centers.
I'll start
Okay.
and we'll see whether Director Late has something to add or if you have follow-up questions. In many of our commercial zones, we do allow housing. And so it's more about how it is placed to maintain the feel of those commercial districts. And so being clear that that housing could be above or behind, but that we want to keep the retail fronting on the street to keep that environment. Ms. Eisenberg, can you confirm that those zones would already have allowed housing?
So this is where these two shopping centers are confusing. There's a table in the zoning code that very clearly says residential uses are not permitted in these two areas. But then if you look at the CN base district, residential is just not allowed on the ground floor. So it's kind of muddy. Now, these buildings right now are 1 story, so you wouldn't, the way the buildings are today, you wouldn't have residential on that ground floor. This is just, to some extent, sending a signal that if there were a repositioning of the shopping center into a mixed use configuration, residential could be on those upper floors.
And in terms of state laws, because the commercial zones do allow housing as part of a mixed use project in our comprehensive plan, then that is something that, through the different state laws would be an opportunity in those locations.
Yeah, I should I think maybe to try to answer your question more directly. As long as residential is allowed, I mean, there is the possibility of waiving any requirement for ground floor retail use, either waiving or perhaps more likely taking an incentive or concession to eliminate those uses. And so that's just a reality of operating in an environment where, you know, state density bonus law is going to apply to, you know, projects, you know, qualifying projects.
But so currently, part of the zoning code says you can't have it there, and then another part does. That. I mean, I know it's confusing, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying to clarify. But what is then what would be the same? I mean, if somebody were to put in an application right now for housing complex at the Midtown Shopping Center, does that move forward?
I think we would look at the application and look at the code and try to interpret it if an application came in, given the ambiguities. I'd say for purposes of what the committee is doing today, I mean, there's an opportunity to clarify that ambiguity today, and there's, you know, so you should, you know, decision should be made as to, you know, whether to allow housing with, you know, the risk that we just discussed, or not allow housing. And you know, if there was a decision to remove housing designation, you know, my understanding from that comment is that you know, that would require a general plan amendment if housing is currently allowed under the general plan.
Correct.
And that again, it could also raise other issues of compliance with state law.
Right, because housing, even if there are these zoning designations that might prohibit housing, or be unclear about whether housing is allowed, the comprehensive plan does allow housing in these commercial zones. That's an existing state.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, I think George wants to as well.
So if we allow housing on the second floor, someone could come in and ask for a density bonus project and say one of their waivers is to get rid of ground floor retail.
Possibly a waiver, but almost certainly, you know, if they're eligible for an incentive or a concession, yeah.
But if we do nothing, can they come in and still do that and say the underlying zoning is CN and therefore I want to do a density bonus? Are we in the same boat, or does it increase our risk by allowing second story housing?
Well, so, you know, again, we would look at any application, you know, individually, but, under state density bonus law, you know, the allowable density will be determined by whatever's, you know, greatest between, you know, what's allowed in the, you know, will be determined by the comprehensive plan in this case, even if there's, you know, conflicting standards in the zoning ordinance. So I think someone would come in and rely on that, you know, if they were interested in building housing on these sites. So I think, you know, the question for the committee today is really whether you want to clarify that ambiguity. There's an opportunity to correct what's, you know, potentially an inconsistency between the comprehensive plan and the zoning. But you know, I mean, I just do think that once you open the door to housing, I mean, there is that risk of losing retail, and that's really a common problem with, issue. I mean, is problem, I guess, depends on your viewpoint, but it's a common issue with redevelopment of some of these older shopping centers in the region.
One area where this is actually a potentially active problem, and so I don't think this is a discussion for tonight, but just flagging while we're on this conversation, is that the Bills Phil's site is about 1 acre. It's on the market for around $9 million or $10 million or something. It's marketed, I believe, as a use the state density bonus, waive all retail, and build housing here. And to some extent, that location is a pretty tough location for new retail because it is isolated from the rest of the Middlefield shopping areas. But that is not a theoretical possibility. It's something that's actively being marketed to people who might want to buy and that side and develop housing. And so that is what I've found out recently. There's maybe some room for rezoning sites or asking our city attorney what kind of options we have to rezone sites and allow housing, but also somehow still protect some retail element. There might be some creative ways of dialing the amount of housing we allow in CN and CS zones, or dialing other things. These are conversations that I think are tricky to have in public because they're also signaling to developers who might be interested in developing housing on like a fill site. I mean, I'd love to support mixed use there. I'd love to support housing there, but yeah, these are conversations that I think maybe we should try to refer to ourselves basically as a follow-up in an upcoming meeting, so we can have a clear recommendation to the rest of council about how to tighten this up.
Do you have more questions, Greer, or are you still pondering?
Still pondering. You can come back to me though.
Okay, I'll let you ponder while I move on. Yeah, I think second story, third story housing at these places would be wonderful. I just don't want to put the retail at risk for that. So I would propose that we perhaps table that aspect of this. Overall, I think this is a good move forward. I support almost all the stuff in it. One question, are we getting rid of CUPs altogether, or are we getting rid of just certain types of CUPs, and so we're going to then down the road have a CUP or AUP?
I can answer that quickly. We are renaming the CUP to AUP.
Okay.
And there are some places where there are modifications as to whether the use would require that use permit or whether it is just permitted.
Okay. And there's no case where you look at all the different cases where we require a CUP where you say, no, I really want a more stringent hoop to jump through. You're satisfied that AOP is sufficient?
Yes, because anytime we have an AUP, the director has the authority to elevate it for review
Okay.
at a
Very
public
good.
hearing.
Very good. I do think from a marketing standpoint, AUP makes more sense because that's really what it is. So I support that. Let's go back to the personal services. I support that. This, right now whether a doctor is there or not is the limiting factor. And that seems kind of an artificial constraint because we're kind of encouraging lack of expertise. And I would think that if they're performing certain tasks, we should encourage them, if they think a doctor would be useful, to have a doctor on there. But the fact that we're saying, no, you can't have a doctor if you want to do this on University Avenue, okay, then we'll take a risk and not have a doctor. That seems to me not the good way to go. And so I think what's proposed here is a reasonable way of getting around that, of saying, well, it's not directed by a doctor. We have a doctor on site for consultation, but he's not doing procedures. He's just providing his expertise. So I think that what's proposed on packet page 64 is a good idea. I think it's a good starting spot. I could see down the road wanting to expand that and make it more general, but I think as a first cut, I think that's a pretty narrow change, and I think a pretty safe change. Right now, if someone goes in a spa, they can have a scrub put on their face. What happens if they do like laser resurfacing of a face? Is that considered medical, or is that considered a day spa?
I'm going to invite Ms. Einsberg to address that question.
I think it's a great question. I think it's probably tricky. I can't answer what might be happening, but that's where interpretation comes in. So if a day spa is proposed in the city, are we looking at what all the different treatments are and who is doing them and how they are licensed? I don't know what is happening there, but I think that's kind of the right question to be asking. Is something more like a day spa, or is it more like a medical office?
How about Botox? Is that medical?
Yes.
Okay. So I think down the road, we may want to expand, Jay, but I think that's the language they have there, I think is pretty good. I think it's clean. slide 11, we have the RPO. And so I looked over on packet page 61, and they have the map there on packet page 61. And all the sites are not traditional retail. So packet page 61, it's going to be an eye chart on this. They're scattered around. They're not in the traditional areas. And I think this is a type of maybe perhaps overreach, unintentional overreach that we had when we did the RPO. So I feel pretty confident. My only concern is that some of these might have some sales tax associated with it. Have we done an estimate of how much sales tax we would do if all these places, how much we lose if we shut down these retail?
I can answer a little bit. I mean, we have not done a sales tax analysis. I would say what this is doing is saying that if the use goes away, no fault of the retail preservation ordinance or any other regulation, if the use goes away, does it need to be replaced by retail or retail-like or not? And so that's what this is doing. It wouldn't control whether the business actually goes out of business, just what needs to happen in the case of what can come in next.
Yeah, but if you look right now on the screen on the upper right there, that I think that's Carmel Stone Imports, and they're profitable and they pay sales tax. It may be more profitable for them to build housing there, which probably be a good thing, but that also means that we would be losing some sales tax. And so what's that trade-off? And I don't know. We may have the unintended consequences of hurting the budget by allowing these to convert over to another use. I think overall I'm supportive, but when this comes to council, can we give an estimate of how much sales tax these collectively provide?
That may be difficult since that report would likely go out tomorrow
Okay.
for your meeting on the 15th.
And I will add, we did exempt out the San Antonio area road sites. And so when we looked at what the GM ROLM sites that were actually affected by the retail preservation, there were a lot of building materials, tile, wholesale or building materials that would have tax implications. But we generally, most of those businesses, if we move right on the screen, you can see are in that San Antonio road area, and so wouldn't be affected under this proposal.
Okay. Yeah, so overall, I am supportive of this, the change to just because it's not traditional areas, they're scattered about, and if we lose them, I don't think we've lost all this. What we're really trying to protect is the core business areas. So, okay, then slide 7. Can you go down to slide 7? And we're talking about medical office on University. Right now, medical office is not allowed on University, even with a retail component, correct? Or certain parts of University.
That is correct, not on the ground floor. And what this would do is it would require a, now called an AUP, process to consider it, and it would require that there be a retail component in the front.
Yeah, and so when we talked about this last year at retail, the direction is that we were happy on the side streets on Hamilton, Lytton. We wanted University to not have medical offices, dental offices, that type of thing. We didn't think that was appropriate right on University, but the side streets we were fine with. So I would want to see this carved up so we're expanding. What about the side streets right now? Is it halfway to University, or what's the regulation?
Medical office is currently allowed in the CDC zone, for example. So it's just where the GF ground floor overlay is that it's not listed as a permitted use.
And how far does that ground floor overlay go? Is it half block off University? Or is it full block off University?
It actually includes Hamilton Avenue, some of the parallel streets as well. It's not just University. And so this proposal to allow neighborhood serving office, which includes medical office, would allow it as long as it's not fronting on University Avenue. And then if it was fronting on University Avenue, it would have to have the retail component and go through the use permit process. So that component, the fronting on University, is something that could be pulled out of this proposed ordinance if that is a concern to the committee.
Okay, yeah, so I would want to see that pulled out. I don't have any problem with the side streets or Hamilton or Lytton, but I want University to stay status quo. Okay, and then yeah, and that's all I have. Where did you finish your pondering?
Yeah. I like George's thought on pulling out this just greater discussion on the shopping centers and then having that as a larger discussion later with our other neighborhood serving kind of shopping districts within the city. And because yeah, I agree with you, Keith. I mean, it'd be great to see 2-3 stories of housing, but this is one of my frustrations with these state housing laws is here's a situation where, yeah, it'd be great for us to be able to expand housing opportunities, and yet we're concerned about that unintended consequence of actually then losing the retail that makes these neighborhoods really really vibrant and special. And personally, I go to both Midtown and Charleston all the time, so that would be really devastating for those neighborhoods to lose that retail. Now, I think that's probably a bit of a long shot, but still, and we have seen it happen around the Bay Area quite a bit. And then just then on that issue of health screening, what was sorry, Ms. Eisberg, to the definition that you gave that might expand this proposed definition of health screening?
Elective, non-emergency wellness or aesthetic treatments.
But so then, I guess that could allow, right, like a Botox, but more invasive, like a plastic surgery center.
Yeah.
And I don't think we want to see that. So
Yeah, I wouldn't mind referring that to PTC if they want to discuss, do we expand this at all? But I think I'm a little nervous that we haven't scrubbed it well enough.
That's my concern too. I like the idea, but I'm also uncomfortable making that decision just right here.
Yeah. So are you, what about the bottom of page 64, that definition? Are you happy with that?
So this wasn't vetted by PTC either. That proposed language
they discussed
that came in afterwards.
This particular language was not vetted, but this was part of their discussion about it. And they were somewhat supportive, but they were worried about, is this one step about having like Quest Diagnostic or something like that, where they're now doctors are sending orders and you're going and getting a blood draw at Quest Diagnostic, and they felt a little uncomfortable there. And so because of their concerns about allowing Quest Diagnostic and other types of medical, the fact that it says not primarily fulfilling outside medical orders, that was in response to PTC's concerns.
Well, maybe if we remove primarily and did so long as no medical treatment and not fulfilling outside medical orders. Because then if we get into that, then it almost kind of reminds me of this issue we get with bars and food, and what point is it 50%?
Chris, do you want to talk about the term primarily? Is that problematic? Would be cleaner if we just struck primarily?
It would potentially eliminate some ambiguity, but it would give less flexibility for, lots of businesses have ancillary uses to the main use. And so it's pretty common to allow those uses in zoning codes, either generally or specifically with this kind of language. So I think the word primarily would give staff a little bit of flexibility to interpret the provision consistent with the purposes of the zone.
Okay, so you're happy with is there anything else in that wording that you would find problematic at all?
No, I don't find any legal concerns with it. And I think, as long as planning is comfortable with sort of being the implementability, I don't have any concerns with it.
And planning, are you happy with the wording as is on J?
Yes, I think we're comfortable with that. We would be asking for a business description to ensure that it is consistent with this. If it, shifts over time and we get a code complaint, then we would have to deal with it at that point.
Yeah. George, what are your thoughts about the wording on J?
I think narrow is good for now, because we really are we're really reacting to one specific case. I'm not actually strongly opinionated about the wording on J. I think it's basically fine. Have some more thoughts about medical uses in general, because I'm trying to square up like allowing J, but then also how we're thinking about other medical offices. But we could wrap up this okay. I'm guessing when it comes to neighborhood serving offices or medical offices with on-site retail, that could be small doctor's offices, but what sort of jumps out at me is that those would be like med spas where there's a doctor and there's Botox or other sort of like voluntary medical procedures. Is that like really what we expect and what we're getting at behind that wording?
The image here of Sight for Sore Eyes is actually a classic example where you've got an eye doctor and they're selling glasses.
Okay. Yes. That is what I was about to say, which was, I think it's basically fine to have medical office use on University and Cal Ave. We already have a bunch of optometrists on Cal Ave, multiple, 2 or 3. I think it's fine. Doesn't really bother me. It's better than a vacancy. And when I think about what do we generally care about in terms of having a good retail space, it's foot traffic, it's services that residents and visitors, but mainly residents actually use. It's just keeping investment in the street, sales tax revenue as well. And I think if we have medical office with on-site retail, whether it's a dentist or optometrist or med spa, we basically tick all those boxes. So I don't necessarily have a big concern. I guess if we want university to be this like highly curated, high-end destination, maybe we might want to pull those off. University, but for Cal Ave, like it's just a neighborhood.
But the second bullet, both retail last year heard this and PTC also heard it. And both of them came back and said they didn't want medical right on University. And so now after going through this vetting process, now we're flipping it. And I would say if we really do want this, and there are arguments, both pros and cons,
right,
especially when you have vacancies, but I would think you'd want to have PTC scrub this and
Right.
be okay with it before you.
Right. But this was the point that PTC said they couldn't reach a decision for some reason and wanted us to decide. Were they just deadlocked, or were they just unsure about the long-term value?
For the second bullet, they had no issues. They said leave the status quo for the second bullet.
Oh, they did not approve the PTC did not recommend having medical offices with on-site retail in University and Cal-Ave?
Correct.
I believe they did. They were supportive of that. The component they did not make a specific recommendation on was this med spa medical scanning issue. But Ms. Eisberg, please go ahead.
Yes, I think they, were open to the idea of medical offices on University and California Avenue, but parsing out which types of uses were appropriate, that's where they were really referring to the council. And they were talking about things like blood draws, laboratories. Those are elements that are specifically in this proposal to add J, specifically excluded. Things that you would need to generally be following a medical order for, like a follow-up CT scan or a blood draw.
And I think the part of that was that those didn't have retail. When we talked about a medical office that had retail fronting it, that they were more comfortable with that. It was when it was something more of a personal service that you had a kind of a lobby entry.
When I talked to the PTC commissioners, they did not come to a conclusion about J. They thought that they weren't opposed to J. They had some concerns and they thought that they should delegate that to council.
Agreed.
Okay. And then if you look back at the slide here, the first bullet, one of the concerns is that with these large units, retail may not want to take the whole portion. So the back side, they had no problem with that being medical, having therapists or dentists or whatever in the back half. And so you could have an unrelated business where the front half is selling sweaters and the back half is a dentist office or a therapist. They didn't have any problem with that.
Correct.
What they did not want is they did not want a dentist office with retail or a eyeglass store with retail on University. They thought that it was appropriate for the side streets, but not, and also Hamilton and Lytton, but not on University. And that was the same direction that we came up with retail last year, is that there was concern about throwing medical offices, even with retail, right on University.
I think you're hearing something different from staff in terms of the staff interpretation of the discussion at the PTC, that they were comfortable with this second bullet. Chair, it sounds like perhaps you're referring to conversations you've had with individual PTC commissioners.
Correct.
And I'll add one additional thing, that I think there was some question about what the correct depth requirement or floor area requirement for that retail was, that they weren't sure what the appropriate size was, which was why we did, have our consultants kind of look into what was appropriate for that.
So my preference would be to allow the first bullet, but the second bullet, not allow that, just keep the status quo on University and Cal-Ave. And then if we want to revisit this, we always can change it again. But I don't think we've had a consensus that we want to add medical office on University and Cal-Ave.
One meta question, is there a process? Is there a retail ordinance round 2 or I guess maybe round 3 or whatever however we would number it, to come after this, where we could do consideration of some more tweaks? Like, is this something that we plan to do every couple of years, for example? Because then this would naturally slot in. But if this is just something that we're going to decide and then never come back to, that doesn't seem ideal.
It's not currently part of our work plan, though we do hope in the coming years to be able to do a more comprehensive zoning code update and would look at that sort of thing, though realistically that's likely to not happen until after we do the comprehensive plan update.
Okay, so it sounds like at least for a few years we can always prioritize this in our yearly priority setting, but it's possible that we don't come back to this for a few years. I mean, I think there are cases like the far end of University in downtown, or even the 102 University Avenue building that was referenced, where the street frontages aren't really, 102 University, it's like kind of on University, but it's actually sort of angled and not really facing where anyone actually walks or has retail. And like, yeah, maybe maybe the first floor of that could be a nice psychiatrist, dentist, optometrist, whatever office, where it's like on technically the address is University, but so tucked and angled away. It's like not even. So it's like maybe we do the PTC recommendation except for the stretch from I'm going to be imprecise, from like the Starbucks to the Blue Bottle or something, or just some way to keep some flexibility without like getting the prime part of University potentially at risk for these kind of less walkable uses.
I do think that both ends seem like it might be an improvement to change the zoning on both ends, but my preference would be to send that to PTC and say, hey, this is our concern.
Right.
Can you study this and give us a recommendation?
Right. I just really want to get to a unanimous vote today because, it's, I mean, I think it's all basically good. Yeah.
So what do you think, Greer?
Which is the question then for staff. What does this look like going forward if we pull a couple of pieces of it, but are then unanimous on the motion of whatever moves forward? Can that be implemented?
Right. I think we could split it up based on what you're comfortable advancing to the Council for Immediate Action versus what may require additional review.
Then I'm fine with that if we pull the discussion on kind of the neighborhood shopping centers and the medical offices with on-site retail, and advance the other things, but including the modification of adding the health screening.
Okay.
Was the concern about the medical offices only on University or also on Cal Ave, where we have some optometrists right now, and to be like, if they closed, it'd be weird not to let another optometrist move in. But we would not be allowing them to move in, I suppose, if we didn't make this language change. Because I'm presuming those optometrists are grandfathered in, for example.
So what is the current zoning on Cal Ave that they don't allow? So do they come in before the zoning was changed?
I think that's a question for staff. Like, how can there be optometrists on Cal Ave right now?
So we have a couple different situations for optometrists. In several of the cases that you're thinking of, it really is predominantly a retail space.
Right.
That maybe there's an exam room in the back that supports that retail, but because it is predominantly retail, it has been allowed as a retail use.
Oh, okay. So like the site for sore eyes example would still be allowed on University before and after.
I would have to look at the floor plan. We have another example that's proposed on Hamilton right now, for example, that has more of the floor plan that is being used up for exam rooms, and therefore it's seen as more medical office than retail, and so under the current rules would not be allowed. Under the proposed ordinance, where it allows this neighborhood serving office on streets other than University and California Avenue, we would be able to allow that.
Okay. And I'm sure that's work no one loves doing, like using a ruler and trying to make a judgment call on where you cross the line. But yeah, I mean, I'm fine with I'm really
So-
not that strongly opinionated either way, but I think if university is what we care about in terms of having this flagship image of a bustling area, maybe we just hold it on university, and let the rest of the, I guess, staff and PTC recommendation continue outside of that.
Okay, that seems,
Should I try to make a motion or?
yeah, go ahead.
I also just want to read the room. So, okay, I move the staff recommendation with a additional language to allow health screening uses and a modification not to allow medical offices on university. Notably, I'm excluding CalAb from that, and to refer to this committee further hearings on let's just go to this committee further hearings on neighborhood retail and housing and neighborhood shopping centers.
Okay, and then also add from packet page 64, the definition of J for personal services.
Yeah, we can just use that language. Still feels weird to use the language directly, but I'm not going to be able to think of better language on the spot.
You guys can just take a look and let me know.
Wow. Screening uses, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Screaming is already allowed.
Okay.
Motivation not to allow diversity and refer to the economic
Yes.
and yes, right. And then so the referral would be both that beyond neighborhood shopping centers and medical personal services. I guess also we might want to refer the medical personal services to the PTC, but that just really depends on how clear we think their recommendation was. If we think if there's dispute on whether they had a recommendation on that, maybe we should just bring it back to PTC and then bring it here. Or
Yeah,
if we think we know what they said, we can just keep
the
it here.
question is they were opposed to pure medical. The question is how much retail was needed to make it retail balance. You have
Okay.
mixture of retail
Okay.
and health. And I didn't flush that out.
Yeah, I think we can keep that here because, yeah, that is what they couldn't decide before. So we don't need to bring it back to PTC for them to say that maybe they couldn't decide again. We can just keep it here.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that's
So
everything in the motion.
Thank you. Just confirm that it's correct on the screen, please.
To allow health screening uses.
can you put 3 bullets to say what we're changing?
Yeah, just put it in bullet points instead of the ands.
Maybe a colon following allow.
And then did you guys want me to put it in bullet points?
Yeah, the 3 things that are being changed just for clarity.
And for the health screening uses, I believe you specified that it would be the language on packet page 64, item J, that was proposed by the commenter?
Yes, I don't know if we need to specify that in the motion exactly. If you can think of a better word tweak or whatever.
I
We
think
can
we
leave
would
that.
want something similar just because we want it to be narrow.
Yeah. We definitely want something narrow. I just worry that if we put the exact words in the motion and then staff tomorrow's like, oh, actually it would be a little bit tighter or more in line with the code if we changed one word, then
Okay.
Staff wouldn't do that. But I think staff understands that we just want something narrow.
Yeah, maybe say similar to what was on package page
Yes.
64.
Yes, good call.
Okay, so can you break?
I believe I might be missing one.
And can you break the first bullet up into 2 bullets and say health screening uses similar to the language on packet page 64? And then a modification to not allow medical office on university.
Through the chair, if I may,
Mhm.
for the third bullet, that was going to be about allowing housing in the neighborhood shopping centers,
Yes.
not the medical personal service, or
I guess there were two.
was it, there were 2 items?
The other is, do we want to make this J more broad down the road?
Okay, so instead of the word beyond,
Hearings on,
housing
Housing.
in neighborhood shopping centers
that's good.
and locations for medical personal service, maybe?
Yeah, medical
Locations.
office and service.
And definition of?
Yeah.
Yep.
That last part.
Right after locations
Mhm.
and definition of.
Medical office and personal services.
After the word housing, between housing and neighborhood.
Housing in neighborhood shop. Very good. Sorry, we're working you.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate
You got 17 people yelling at you. So, okay. Greer, are you happy with that motion? Anything you want to modify?
I just a question then for staff. So we would be allowing medical offices with on-site retail on Cal Ave. And that's so we will see continued uses of things like the optometrists with the eyeglasses sales, but we're not going to see dental offices or other things.
I believe that medical office is actually currently allowed with a CUP on California Avenue, so that's not as big a
Oh.
change as it would have been
Okay.
for university.
So actually,
Okay.
it's no change. Or
Yeah.
actually, it's a change that if medical office is already allowed with CUP, now we're allowing medical offices with on-site retail with the CUP. So we're actually just adding a retail requirement to the CUP that we already allow.
I believe so, Ms.
I think
Eisenberg.
that's fine
Okay.
for the record. I think
I
that's
don't
fine.
think, I don't think medical office is allowed in the R overlay. So not on California Avenue, but on in the CC2, but I need to double check.
Okay,
Yeah.
but our understanding of this motion is that medical office, like the optometrists with retail of a certain depth in front would be allowed, but with a conditional use permit, so that there would be some control and process
Okay.
and public
Yeah.
notice.
But you're not going to be able to open a dentist office on Cal Ave by just selling a few toothbrushes.
No, there's a depth of that retail that is required that generally would be more than that.
Okay, I'm fine with this. I'll second it.
Okay, take the vote.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Lou,
Yes.
Chair Rectal,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Okay. Okay, that took longer than expected, but a good result. We can go into consent. Okay, so next up, we are going to be doing the shrink wrap.
Yes, and just a time check, and just as you noticed, yeah, I think it's about 7 o'clock now. And I think we're going for 2 hours.
Okay,
So this next item is known as the shrink wrap rule, and on February 25, PTC unanimously recommended the text amendment to go before the city council. So what this would do is allow existing non-complying floor area to be replaced through renovation or the construction of new buildings without restriction to the existing building envelope. So for this presentation, our senior historic planner, Stephen Switzer, will present, and of course, Director Late and Assistant Director Armour are here to respond to any questions thereafter. I will send it to Stephen.
Good evening. Let's take a trip downtown. So in the following slides, I'll provide some background, and it's 3 slides of the legislative history for this district. So if we go back to the 1980s, the commercial downtown district was formed in 1986 with that ordinance. There's a snippet of that on the screen. Following that, a report in 1988 was prepared, concluding that some of those buildings that were affected by the new zoning standards applied could be remodeled or replaced if there's no increase in, say, non-compliance of that floor area. And for about 27 years, there was consistent staff interpretation of that said report. And that leads us to our next slide, where in 2013, there was a proposal to relocate approximately 6,000 square feet across the street at 261 Hamilton for a rear addition. And there is a snippet of that article from that time on the screen. Following that, in 2014, council had clarified that that section of code prohibits shifting non-complying floor area from, say, below grade to above grade. And that project was no longer pursued. If we go the next year, in 2015, council further directed staff to prepare a code amendment to reinforce said provision and interpretation. And that leads us to the last slide of the legislative history. In 2017, an ordinance was added that clarified those definitions, if you will, of the building envelope and prohibited replacing non-complying floor area in a way that would alter the building's 3-dimensional shape. And we've called that the shrink wrap, if you will, of kind of keeping those buildings as they are. And in more recent years, in 2022, there was a pre-screening to allow the replacement of some non-complying floor area also across the street at 616 Ramona Street. And following that pre-screening, as detailed on the screen and in the staff report, council had provided some direction to staff and the applicant on some items to investigate should a text amendment be pursued. So that leads us to our next slide with the actual text amendment. And with that, it is to simply remove one section and 2 portions of that code. So that would be A2C as well as B2C, as well as some references to grandfather that are in the zoning code. So removing those 2 sections would effectively allow non-complying floor area to be demolished and replaced, say renovations or new construction on those properties with differing heights, footprints, and building envelopes, but all would need to be compliant with the zoning code. It's for those affected properties that are detailed in that attachment C that we'll get into a little bit further, but that proposed text amendment is included in attachment A, and a draft ordinance to implement said text amendment is in attachment D. So moving on, some considerations for the discussion tonight. We have the feedback from our two Planning and Transportation Commission meetings that occurred last year, as well as early this year in February. Overall, there was support for reducing development barriers and a recommendation of the applicant's proposed text amendment at that last meeting. Also, keeping in mind some of these city-led initiatives that are affecting our downtown area, our downtown housing plan, and more recently, the Senate Bill SB 79 that went to council this week, as well as the Housing Element Program 3.9. And as mentioned, that attachment C with the properties potentially affected and trying to balance some of council's priorities for housing and economic vitality, which I think we had a great discussion right before this one about that. So just to briefly highlight some of those properties affected, there's 302 parcels in the downtown area. Some of those are air parcels. The staff report gets into a little bit more context on those parcels. But what we're really looking at are those 66 parcels that have the red striping on them, which have a floor area of above 1 FAR. Floor area ratio, which would bump them into a non-complying property. Out of those 66 parcels that would be directly affected by the text amendment, there's been some that have been developed in the more recent years. So it's unlikely to rebuild soon. So it's likely that 47 properties would be directly affected, but it still would apply to those 66 parcels at large. And with that, we're on to the recommendation that staff has prepared. It's to recommend that City Council adopt an ordinance to modify the municipal code section consistent with that applicant's request. And we do have the applicant's representative here with us tonight. I believe that they have a few slides to present, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
This will pick me up from
Slide it closer, yeah.
Nice. Good evening again, Chair Rectal, council members. Ken Hayes with Hayes Group Architects. I'd like to thank Planner Switzer for that history on the text amendment and what I'm going to present tonight. I've really reduced edited my presentation back because I only thought I had 3 minutes, but I don't. But I'm not going to do the long version, okay? It's pretty simple. So it's no coincidence that this is on the agenda tonight for you to consider. It's about economic vitality, it's about renewal in our downtown, and it's about fairness to property owners. Next slide. According to public records and affirmed by staff at the PTC meeting, not one new building subject to the shrink wrap rule has been built in the downtown since the shrink wrap rule was adopted 10 years ago. Not one building. Next slide. Up until the shrink wrap rule adoption in 2016, January of 2016, an owner could tear down an old building and replace the existing floor area in a new, better building. And this continued from 1986 until 2016. These are just a few of our projects, 30 years. Next slide. A city manager's report that Mr. Switzer just pointed out in 1988 emphasized this point. Non-complying buildings would be permitted to be remodeled and replaced, provided there would be no increase in the building's non-compliance, in floor area, or in height. However, in remodeling or in replacing, such buildings would be permitted to be reconfigured in terms of length, width, and height, so long as the existing floor area was not increased. The report provided examples. Oh, this is good. You're on the right slide. Stating a 10,000 square foot building, two-story building, could become a 10,000 square foot three-story building so long as other site development restrictions were not exceeded. This would lead to improved building design, enhancing the downtown, is what the city manager's report said. Next, so you can see here, a 10,000 square foot two-story building, same square footage in the three-story building, lots of area left over for site amenities, just better building design in the downtown. Next slide. The shrink wrap rule says that, quote, building envelope shall mean the three-dimensional shape and size occupied by an existing building. So picture a building covered in shrink wrap. What this means is if a building owner tears down their non-complying building, they can rebuild to match the existing building. But if they want to increase the floor-to-floor height, make better retail space or whatever, or change the footprint, reconfigure the footprint to make a better building, they must remove all of the non-complying floor area, and that's above the 1-to-1. So they forfeit it. So if you had a two-story building, to replace it with a higher floor height, you're going to forfeit. And that's the next slide. Please. So eliminating existing floor area that exceeds a 1-to-1 FAR to build a new, better building is a non-starter. No owner is going to tear down their building to build back the same building. So essentially, buildings are paralyzed in the downtown. In a Class B building, existing floor area is minimally worth $1,200 a foot. So a two-story building on a 5,000 square foot lot, which we have many, loses $6 million in value because they are required to remove non-complying floor area, and it gets worse for larger buildings, obviously. So no owner is going to tear down their building to lose value. And the facts prove this point. No new building subject to the shrink wrap rule has been built in the downtown in 10 years. Next slide. Since adoption of the shrink wrap rule in 2016, development's been dead. The next slide. Oh, that's the next slide. Oh, no, there's got to be two more before that. Okay, well, yeah, interesting. Okay, so next slide. Next slide. So these are examples of, really, they're all. Okay, I had a half a dozen shots in of what a non-complying building looks like in the downtown. And I'm not picking on buildings, okay? So if you happen to be the owner of this building or the tenant, I'm not commenting on that. I'm just saying this is a non-complying building. If you wanted to make that better retail space, better office space, just a better building, you'd have to get rid of the second floor in order to do that and start with a 1-to-1 FAR. Next slide. This building, maybe this also exceeds a 1-to-1 FAR, so it either has a basement or it has a mezzanine inside. So in order to renovate or improve this building, tear it down, build a new better building, you would not be able. You'd have to get rid of that basement floor area. Now we all know you can't get rid of basement floor area because of the retail preservation ordinance, so you're kind of stuck. That area has to stay. So the future of this building is essentially what you see today. You could change awnings, but you couldn't increase the height of the building. You couldn't increase the height of the roof behind that parapet because that is covered in shrink wrap. Next slide. Same thing for these buildings, just coincidentally a for lease sign on it. Next slide. And again, for this building here, to do anything there, they'd have to eliminate their whole second floor and start over. Next slide. So the benefits to the downtown and building owners by eliminating the shrink wrap rule are many. Better, accessible, code compliant, healthier buildings responding to contemporary needs. Greener, daylit, energy efficient, all electric buildings with solar arrays offsetting embodied carbon. more desirable retail spaces with higher ceilings and glass storefronts to attract more retailers to Palo Alto. We're competing against Stanford Shopping Center, Burlingame, San Mateo. They have beautiful retail buildings, and it encourages owners to think about building mixed-use housing projects because they can replace the commercial floor area. So you might have a two-story building that has commercial floor area and a floor or maybe two floors above that of potential housing. And I actually forgot to mention this. I should have mentioned this during the previous item 1 conversation, but it's probably too late. You really should start to think about allowing two-family residential units in the downtown, because right now it says the definition of the residential use in the downtown is multifamily, and your definition of multifamily is 3 or more units. These sites are small, and being able to get some housing to work is better than forcing someone to try to put 3 units on a 5,000 square foot site. I just wanted to mention that. I'm sorry I didn't say it earlier. Obviously, another benefit is an increased tax base, no increase in commercial floor area. It just replaces the floor area with better floor area, and it restores the natural process of renewal that was interrupted by the shrink wrap rule in 2016. It is fair to building owners who have paid property taxes and parking assessment fees for years on the existing floor area and who might soon be asked to pay assessment fees for the downtown improvement plan. Removing the shrink wrap rule will allow existing floor area above grade to be replaced in new buildings that respond better to the natural and built environments. These new buildings will have different footprints, heights, and envelopes, and they will be able to maintain their existing floor area without increasing the degree of noncompliance while complying with all other site development regulations. Next slide. Remove the shrink wrap rule, these 2 sections, and join staff and the unanimous vote of the PTC to adopt this text amendment. It makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions before we go to public comment? Okay. Any hands raised?
We have one request to speak. Our first speaker is Charlie W.
Good evening again, Charlie Wydans, Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber supports the staff recommendation regarding the proposed amendment to Section 18.18.120. This proposal removes the barrier to reinvestment in downtown Palo Alto by allowing existing floor area to be reconfigured within replacement buildings without increasing the degree of noncompliance. This agreement does not create additional development rights nor increase allowable floor area. Rather, it restores flexibility that existed for decades prior to 2016, as clearly stated in the staff report, and allows existing floor area to be reconfigured in a way that encourages reinvestment, modernization of aging buildings, improves retail spaces, and better positions the properties for future mixed use and housing opportunities. Downtown Palo Alto benefits when investment in properties are robust. We need buildings and spaces that meet the market demand. Functional, attractive, and updated buildings support tenants, attract customers, improve public realm, and strengthen the long-term viability of our commercial districts. The Chamber appreciates the thoughtful analysis of staff and the unanimous recommendation from the Planning and Transportation Committee and respectfully urges your unanimous support. Thank you.
That concludes public comment for item 2.
Yeah, thank you. Come back to Greer. Do you have any questions, comments?
Nope, I always support the staff and PTC recommendation.
I think this is a no-brainer. I think we should move this forward as quickly as we can.
Okay. Staff, what's your opinion on the impact on housing? Because on one hand, if you can rebuild the housing, rebuild the office, you may add extra stories on top of it. But I suspect part of the reason that they passed this in the first place was the hope that these would convert from office into mixed use. You want to talk about the impact on housing, pro con?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to really, I guess, get a say a finger on what a developer might do with their given property, but we kind of fleshed out a little bit of that in the policy considerations in the staff report. just looking at kind of of those properties that were affected, the 66, and assuming, as we've kind of discussed here, like maybe 2, 3, 4 units, it would be around 100 potential residential units that would be affected perhaps. So trying to balance, whether the development potential of a property to either retain, say, retail or have maybe a mixed use component with those units. It would be around 100 units or so, say, in anticipation of, or should I say, following the council's discussion on Monday. I was looking at some of the parcels that were within those tiers or rings, if you will, for the SB 79. So in that most immediate ring, we're looking at about four of the properties listed that would be impacted. And then if we go in that quarter-mile ring, it would be around 20 or so of those that would be affected by SB 79 as well. So I think there's implications for housing, but removing this, I mean, in theory, wouldn't necessarily preclude a developer from developing housing on their property. It's just really that question of what would be, I guess, more economically viable for them, for a tenant, whether it's a resident or, say, an office or a retail space.
Maybe I'm confused, but doesn't section 18.120 require a continuation of the same use?
So there's non-complying uses that also are impacted by this in this code section. But if there's a redevelopment, and say any of the uses specified in that CD district, they could propose a project and have a tenant improvement of the property or any, say, use and occupancy permit for that new use in a space. But if there's a non-complying use, to continue that would need to comply with the code sections.
And that's the difference between the non-complying use or complying, and building, right? That these buildings, the shrink wrap rule really has to do with the size of the building, the floor area. And so it's the building that's non-conforming. Whereas the use might or might not be non-conforming, and that is handled as well through the code, but that's not dictated by the shrink wrap.
Yeah, no, okay. No, I see the non-complying facilities section now. Yeah, thank you.
Is there a difference between non-compliant and non-conforming?
I believe we use one for the use and the other one for the structure, the building.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. And so to me, when they changed this rule, if they really were trying to get rid of the office space, they would have started amortization on it. And they didn't. They said you can have this office space indefinitely. But yet we don't allow them to change it. Seems like the worst of both worlds. So I do support this. And so can we have a motion?
I move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay.
Councilmember Liu,
Yes.
Chair Rectal,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Yes.
motion carries unanimously.
Hey. So Alex, you want? Should we
We-
wait 2
we-
minutes?
We do have a third item, but given that we're 2 hours in, you could take that as a informational item, and obviously we could come back at the next meeting and maybe move this item up a bit, since it has been now then 2 meetings where we haven't been able to talk about the economic activity report. But we're happy to come back next time and.
Okay. Is there any takeaway that you want us?
The only difference that you would see under this report is that economist Steve Levy has obtained data from the state's EDD. So we've added that information in the report. And I think it's important in that there's employment data in there. And just some quick takeaways then. Since the pandemic, from the pandemic through Q2 of 2024, the city overall employers, or workforce rather, decreased by 15,000. At today's juncture, though, we're at about 100,000. We were at 105,000 before the pandemic. Our workforce is over just about 100,000 now. And I think it's an important conversation as it relates to the jobs housing ratio and imbalance. So perhaps we can get into that a little bit. And it would be good to have economist Levy here with us as well for additional background.
Do we think this is a long item, though? I mean, if it's like a brief 15-minute discussion, should we just have it now, or
it can be.
I don't know how brief or not brief we're intending. We're thinking.
Whatever Alex prefers. If
Yeah,
one,
whatever.
You know what?
Fine.
We can make it a quick presentation. Let's do that.
Okay.
Sound good? You okay with that?
Go on.
Okay. So our economic development specialist, Ruth Carias, is here. She's going to start the presentation and I'll take on the last 2 slides. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Chair Rectal, committee members, excited to be presenting today the activity report for June. Next slide, please. Will be first slide, please. Awesome. So we'll be talking briefly through the retail property metrics for Q1 of 2026, downtown University Avenue, kind of in the in-betweens trends of increasing average annual rent, asking rent for downtown, current retail vacancy rent with minor decrease. And so through the span of the year, we've just seen up and down, not too drastically, but there is a change there. For California Avenue, that one's been pretty constant, pretty stable in the way that the trends are moving, not, again, drastically increasing or decreasing with the average annual asking rent, as well as the current retail vacancy rate. Next slide, please. Some notable openings and departures. We have Rakuya that opened last weekend. Got a lot of community engagement on that. Yatori as well. They were able to open right on time before BTS came into town, so they got a lot of momentum there. Zingsters, anew on University Avenue, a lot of momentum there as well. La Corneta is opening this weekend. A lot of excitement from the business owner. Looking forward to that. Bistro de Maya currently passed their final building inspection, so looking forward to their opening soon. And we have a new business who just came in on our radar through a report that is currently going through the process, which is Fire Clay Title across the street from City Hall. One departure that we were made aware of near California Avenue is Provident Credit Union. They did not advise of relocating. They just decided that they would close this location. Next slide. Some business district updates. We've been meeting with our downtown University Avenue stakeholder group, been in discussions regarding the University Avenue Streetscape project with an updated cost for that, and getting the stakeholders in that whether or not they would like to proceed or not. So still currently under discussion. And we're also continuing our discussions for the fiscal 2028 bid, seeing if interest is there and seeing how we can continue that. For California Avenue, as you are already aware, we had our ribbon cutting last week. A lot of excitement from the community and stakeholders, sponsorships. And so we're looking forward to the next 5 events coming on next week, or not next week, in the next couple weeks. June 25th from 5 to 8 p.m. we'll be having our next event. And for this event, is super special, is our entertainment zone will be activated. So we have been in coordination with our businesses to have them feel equipped for this. And what does it mean with their ABC license? Next slide, please. I'll pass it on to Alex.
So as I was just mentioning, this is the new component to our report, the employment data. It's really important for us from an economic development perspective because it is a key economic indicator in terms of how the economy is doing. What isn't listed there at this point is unemployment rate. We're a little above 4%, which is somewhere near the pre-pandemic area. And we're pretty much trending similarly to other cities in Silicon Valley. I've already touched on the 15,000 jobs that were lost from the pandemic through Q2 of 2024. I think this couple of the first two bullet points were already discussed. I think another note that's really important to see or to discuss is the work from home environment. Before the pandemic, back in like 2019 or so, there were roughly about 3,000 people that were working remotely. Of course, the pandemic changed that. That number increased to about 15,000. We're seeing a steady decline in terms of fewer people working from home at about 8,000 jobs, which is really good for our local economy, especially for our small employers. And speaking of employers, you note there that first bullet point, over 25,000 jobs are within the sector of healthcare and social assistance. Over 21,000 jobs would fall under professional, scientific, and technical services and information at approximately 14,000 jobs. I think it's really important here in Silicon Valley and Palo Alto, we often think about our large employers and tech, but over 90% of our businesses have fewer than 20 businesses. So we're still very much a small business environment. Some changes related to employers that employed over 1,000 people. In 2020 or before the pandemic, there were roughly 13 businesses that had over 1,000 employees. We're down to about nine at this point as of Q2 of 2025. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide, and this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier about the jobs, housing, and balance. And I'll just quickly go through this, but what you'll see on the top data set there in terms of households from 2020 to 2025, our households have increased slightly. Population has also increased slightly. And however, the persons per household has decreased just a bit. And then we've already touched on the jobs component of about 115,000 jobs in 2020 to where we are now, closer to 100,000. The data set there at the bottom, that is looking at jobs, population, and housing. That first data set there, jobs, population, you notice the decrease from 2020 through where we are today at 2025 at 1.47. The jobs household ratio also has decreased from 2020 to 2025 at 4.28 to 3.67. And then that last data set of jobs and housing units. Of course, with the housing element, and I think close to 6,000 housing units that are slated to hopefully be built by the end of the housing element year, which I think is 2031, we'll have a better balance. And again, because the overall job count is fewer than it was before the pandemic. That's one of the reasons why you're seeing a closer balance. Well, maybe that's not correct to say, a closer balance. We're a jobs-rich community, and that's not going to change anytime soon. I will stop there. The report, there's a memo that's attached to the staff report, which comes from economist Levy. I don't think he's on virtually, but he was going to share his thoughts. But as you noticed earlier, he's not feeling well. So that's the end of our staff report.
Any comments, questions?
Maybe with just one comment I'll briefly make is that, or comment / question is that, I think it is important to the vitality of downtown and Cal Ave, for example, to have jobs in addition to housing. And so, of course, the jobs housing balance is a moving target in terms of like how exactly we define that. I was curious, one, about the VMware site, which I know has been vacant for a few years, but potentially I hear rumors is going to get leased again. And I'm curious what that might mean for the jobs housing balance and also, you know, all the good things it might mean for Cal Ave businesses and other businesses around the area. Do we know what's happening there?
Yes. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Liu. There is activity around that site, and there's a new property owner that has taken over roughly 1.1 million square feet, and approximately 350,000 square feet is being discussed A lease has not been signed, but it would be a significant tenant that that would really add value to our overall tech industry.
Okay. One more comment, and I'll just notice this as a trend that I've observed, but um, maybe as an idea to percolate long term, is that Cooley, so iconic Palo Alto law firm, is moving out of Palo Alto into Redwood City. I think Paul Hastings, another big law firm that had a big office in the research park, is also moving to downtown Redwood City. Oric from Menlo Park is moving down to Redwood City as well. And so these big law firms, which presumably drive a lot of hotel and downtown and CalAV revenue, seem to have a trend of gravitating away from Palo Alto, where they still are quite heavily concentrated. And I think that's just something to think about as we think about office competitiveness in the shrink wrap rule. How to maintain an appropriate balance of these kinds of jobs that, regularly book out restaurants and regularly cater for hundreds of people every day for lunch and really augment our small businesses. So that's just a comment.
Okay. Can you bring up slide 6? I have three questions here. In the bottom of slide 6, you have households and housing units. What's the difference between those two? Is it vacancies or what's the?
No, housing units is just a residential unit.
And household, is it? I thought maybe they were like per family if you had two families sharing a unit, but then the fact that this is smaller, the third row is smaller, means you must have a larger denominator, which means you have more housing units than households. So it's not people sharing units. It's, my guess is it vacancies? Do we have enough vacancies to cause that difference? Okay. If it's not obvious to you, then I thought maybe this is a stupid question, but
I think it is, but let me can we get back to you?
yeah. Oh yeah. This is not urgent, obviously. Next question is back on slide 5, the very last bullet. We had 13 businesses, more than 1,000, and now we're down to 9. Those 4 businesses that we've lost, do they move out or do they just shed people so now they're below the 1,000 threshold? Do you know?
I would venture to say probably both. We've seen in terms of layoffs in the last few years, there's been quite a bit in the tech industry. At the same time, while there's layoffs happening, there's a surge in hiring because of AI and interest in occupancy of office as well. But I do think that just recognize the economic shock that happened after the pandemic, that some firms were either acquired or moved out of Palo Alto.
Okay. And then the last question is go to slide 2, please. And on the right-hand side, you have the CalAV before and after, but on the university side, we just have the after. Do you know the numbers? How much did it change? Like I'm looking at the first bullet. If you compare on the right-hand side, it says decreases and it has both before and after. But on the left-hand side, the first bullet only has the current rents.
Oh, yes. Are you saying for the second bullet for CalAV for the current retail vacancy rate?
No, I'm looking at the first bullet. For example, on the right-hand side, first bullet says the rent is $56.28 compared to $60 a year ago.
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
so you're wondering what the increase was for downtown University Avenue for the first bullet?
Yeah, how much did it increase? You said it's an increase from a year ago, but doesn't give us numbers.
Yes. So that will be in the packet.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to be 70, an increase from 74.88.
Okay.
From a year ago.
That is a big increase. Okay. I think that's good news. Not good news if you're trying to rent, but that shows that we're vibrant.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
We will get back to you on the inquiry between housing units and households. So the housing units referencing the structure and the households referencing people. But you pointed out something that's interesting in terms of the numbers between those two.
My guess it has to do with vacancies, but that's just a guess. Okay.
Maybe.
Oh, is there any public comment?
No, there are no requests to speak for item 3. Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Oh.
Future meetings.
Oh, sorry. Okay. And so the next meeting. So Alex, do you have the next meeting date? Do you know?
Yeah, so it's going to be the third Wednesday in August when you come back from your recess
Okay.
at 4:30.
So maybe a request for future agenda item, not necessarily in August, but I know in the past there's been some discussion about potential like the city supporting a kind of pop-up retail type of program that San Francisco and San Luis Obispo and other cities do. I had a conversation with a resident the other day the about the idea and kind of re-engaged my excitement for it. So I think it'd be a great thing to kind of discuss as a committee to see what can we do to maybe see if we can do a similar program.
I think on that topic, it's always been hard for me to perceive the value of those programs because they are splashy and they like fill sometimes like 2 spots with like 4 pop-ups. And then it's like, was that it? But now that it's post-pandemic, we can actually evaluate the success of these programs. And I think if we evaluate this program, it'd be good to have some data of like, did it actually work after all the hype in other cities?
The hope is that these pop-ups might show a need and then they would roll into permanent businesses, or it's just going to draw people to the area and.
Well, yeah, I think a combination, like what I've seen in San Luis Obispo, is it's often been used as an opportunity to be able to kind of build a customer base and then move into a more permanent brick and mortar type of location.
Okay. Okay, then we are adjourned.
Thank you.